Starting today, this is the house for me and Bob, she announced. Her words, spoken so boldly and out of the blue, left me utterly speechless. This house was something my husband and I had meticulously planned and built over the years. We were finally looking forward to a tranquil and peaceful retirement life in this quiet piece of land. What on earth are you talking about? I asked in disbelief. Well, haven't we been living together all this while? As your son's wife, it's only natural that I live here. She spoke, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Yes, we had indeed been living together, but the countless troubles she had caused over the years were immeasurable. I had been planning to cut ties with her as we moved to this new place. So, where's my room? She cheerfully asked, prancing around a certain room like an overexcited child. I'll be taking the largest room. Old folks like you don't really need such a big space, do you? She added. Taken aback, I replied without thinking. What? You don't have a room here? What? She exclaimed, her eyes wide in surprise. It appeared she genuinely believed she would be living in this new house. Well, if you really want to live here that much, I responded. My words seemed to have struck a nerve as she turned beet red and angrily confronted me. Even after showing her a suitable living space, she seemed unsatisfied. I had made up my mind I was going to get back at this self-centered, greedy daughter-in-law of mine. My name is Catherine Sanders. Until recently, I was working as a caregiver. After retiring in my 60s, my husband, who also retired around the same time, and I have been enjoying our peaceful days together. It was in my late 20s when I married my husband and gave birth to our son. Despite our busy lives, we worked together to manage household chores and child-rearing, which was quite enjoyable. Perhaps because of the ample love we showered on him, our son grew up to be a kind and considerate young man, just like his father. After getting into a prestigious university, our son landed a job in a major corporation and has been doing well. Now in his 50s, he remains as caring and thoughtful as ever. He always cares for us, and we all support each other without intruding too much into each other's lives. It was when our son was in his 40s that he brought home the woman he wanted to marry. The woman came across as friendly and seemed like a confident person who wouldn't shy away from meeting new people. My husband and I had an enjoyable conversation with her and thought we could rest easy with such a responsible daughter-in-law. However, we realized that this was just a facade after she married our son. Our daughter-in-law turned out to be very self-centered and selfish. After marriage, they started living with us, and her behavior became increasingly problematic. Furthermore, she was constantly demanding something from us, which was exhausting for both my husband and me. Hey Mrs. Sanders, can you lend me some money? We don't have enough disposable income because Bob's earnings are low. Our daughter-in-law, who had been so amiable at our initial meeting, began to make outrageous demands as soon as she married our son. I regretted giving them permission to marry. If I had known she was like this, I would have definitely said, you should reconsider. Listen here, Linda. Most people don't squeeze their in-laws for money. You should resolve your issues between you and your husband. When I replied calmly, my son's wife, Linda, began to yell as she usually does. Don't you care that I'm in trouble? This is why I can't stand old-fashioned people like you. Aren't you getting enough money for living? You're being supported by my son's earnings, so if you want to spend money freely, why don't you get a job? Enough. I don't want to hear your nitpicking anymore. Linda continued to insist on borrowing money, despite knowing she always loses to my sound arguments. Living under the same roof and dealing with her rude behavior every day is utterly exhausting. Linda is a stay-at-home wife, but does not lift a finger around the house. Despite Bob working hard and bringing in the income, all she ever does is complain about the house being too dirty and unbearable. Though she's Bob's wife, I'd reached the end of my rope with her. Since Linda moved in with us, our lives have been continuously disrupted. Even though she has a husband, she takes it for granted that she can play around until the early hours of the morning. She would be on the phone loudly, even late at night, or would act self-centered towards me while I'm preparing meals, like saying, I want to eat meat today. I doubt even a teenager would act so arrogantly. My husband and I felt it was ridiculous to cater to Linda, who is, after all, an outsider to us, and there were times when we would just leave the room without engaging with her. We saw no need to bend over backwards for such a disrespectful person. However, Linda seemed displeased with our attitude, and there were instances where she would throw tantrums in anger. She has a troublesome nature, acting out and causing havoc when things don't go her way. It seemed that even Bob was worn out dealing with such a wife. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. If I'd known she was like this, we wouldn't have moved in together. One evening, in Linda's absence, as she was out enjoying another night of partying, Bob apologized to us. Bob felt incredibly guilty for causing trouble to us due to the cohabitation, more than his own hardship. His kind-hearted nature probably prevents him from kicking her out, despite everything. Bob's considerate nature is a virtue, but he doesn't need to be so involved with someone who hurts him and treats him unfairly. We understand you're the one who's having the hardest time, Bob. But you're the one who needs to decide how to deal with Linda from here on out, my husband said, with a mix of kindness and sternness. Bob nodded in response. Don't worry, I've got it under consideration. With that little push from my husband, it seemed like he had made up his mind about something. Unaware that she was being treated as a problem in this house, Linda was out partying again that night. Is it true you guys are building a new house? She asked us out of the blue one day. We're currently living in a house that's about 70 years old. My husband and I had been planning for years to use our savings to build a new house when we retire. When we first met, I mentioned it, but it seemed like Linda didn't really listen, as she reacted as if hearing it for the first time. In reality, the construction is nearly complete, and we're even packing for the move, but we felt no obligation to tell Linda. Yeah, so what? I responded curtly. Upon hearing my reply, Linda began to pound on the table in protest. Why are you building a house for yourselves when you won't be around for much longer? You should build a house for Bob and me. We might even have a child in the future, and we don't have our own house yet. Isn't it only fair that you provide at least the down payment? Her demands were unbelievable. It's true that sometimes parents provide the down payment when their child buys a house. But I hadn't heard anything about Bob and Linda planning to buy a house. And both Bob and Linda are already in their 50s. I had heard they had no intention of having children and they were both okay with it, so I was surprised to hear her use that as a bargaining chip. You said you weren't planning on having kids. And whether or not you have children, you and Bob are fundamentally the ones who should bear the cost of building a house. Do you think all parents should provide the down payment? At my words, Linda's face turned beet red. It seems that Linda is angry because she was told the truth. It's so unfair that you get to live in a new house while we don't. After throwing out that inexplicable parting shot, Linda stormed upstairs. I'm the one who's furious, being asked for money when they have no plans to buy a house. All Linda wants is to find a way to extract money from us. I'm sure she doesn't have the slightest intention to use the money she gained for her life with Bob. Both my husband and I had grown weary of dealing with selfish Linda. We decided that, once we moved to our new home, we'd finally sever all ties with her. A few weeks later, our new house was completed and we, along with my husband, started to prepare for our new life by sending over our belongings. Because we were already physically drained, we had the movers and Bob assist us and steadily progress was made. We had finally managed to get the home we had dreamed of living in for years, just for my husband and I. The realization that we had achieved this in our golden years filled us with a deep sense of satisfaction. However, our tranquility was shattered when an unexpected visitor appeared. It was Linda. Congrats on your new home, she said. We were surprised to see her there, even Bob was taken aback. We hadn't told Linda about our new location, nor about our moving plans. We assumed she must have followed us here when we left home, her actions leaving us with an unsettling feeling. Moreover, Linda had brought a large suitcase and a duffel bag with her, apparently lugging all of it all the way here. We soon understood why. Starting today, this is mine and Bob's house too, she exclaimed. I was shocked by Linda's audacious statement. This was the home my husband and I had planned and built for years, where we intended to spend our twilight years in peace. But it seemed like Linda was planning on living here. What are you talking about? I asked. Well, we've been living together up until now, right? So, it's only natural for me, as your son's wife, to live here too, right? Linda said it as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Why, after all the trouble she's caused us over the years, did she think she could just impose on us like this? The annoyances Linda has caused are too many to count, and we were planning to cut ties with her during this move. So, where's my room? As she rudely barged into our new house and wandered around, both my husband and I found our expressions becoming more stern. Upon arriving in one of the rooms, Linda exclaimed excitedly like a child, "I want this biggest room. Old folks like you don't need this much space." To this, I responded reflexively, "Huh? You don't have a room here? Huh?" Linda was taken aback. She seemed to genuinely believe she could move into our newly built house. Her arrogance made me infuriated. "Well, if you want to live here so badly, how about this spot?" I pointed to the storage space under the stairs. It was full of vacuum cleaners and various household supplies, but it had just enough space for one person. Linda blinked her eyes wide open and laughed off the suggestion as a joke. "Stop kidding around. There's no way I could live there." "Oh, you don't like it? Then come with me." I took Linda outside and pointed to the shed at the corner of the yard. "I think that would be a perfect fit for you. In fact, it's more than you deserve." At my words, Linda's face turned beet red and she charged at me. "You've got to be joking. There's no way I could live there. Enough is enough." The one who cut off Linda's shouting was Bob. Bob, always calm, had never raised his voice or yelled at anyone before. But this time, he seemed unable to hold it back anymore, pulling Linda away from me and leading her off our property. "How long do you plan on causing trouble for me and my parents? You're in your 50s. Aren't you ashamed of being so selfish towards your in-laws?" At Bob's justified anger, Linda's face turned an even deeper shade of red. She seemed lost for words, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. "Linda, there's no place for you here. After all, you're no longer part of our family." "Huh? What do you mean?" As I explained in a scolding tone, Linda finally let out a bewildered cry. "I'll explain," said Bob, looking at Linda with a severity I had never seen in him before. "I know you've been cheating. I've hired a detective and collected evidence since your nightlife became excessive. I'm planning to divorce you. So, you're no longer part of our family." Bob spoke calmly, but I could only imagine how much pain he had been through to come to this decision. Linda had kept cheating on Bob, thinking he would not confront her, and the evidence collected was compelling. Bob had started contemplating divorce relatively early in their marriage. However, given Linda's character, he had assumed she would not agree easily. So he had gathered enough evidence to make her unable to deny it, and meticulously prepared to ensure the divorce would go through. Upon hearing all this, Linda was petrified, her mouth agape. "I've told your parents about this too. My parents planned to tear down the house you used to live in. There's no place for you here anymore." "What am I supposed to do when you drop something like that on me all of a sudden?" she exclaimed. "As an adult, you should think for yourself. Anyway, make sure you never come near our house again. Although I presume you won't have any time to spare," was the reply. Linda, who was coldly disowned by our family, remained immobile, slumped on the porch. Bob forcibly sent her away because leaving her here would cause trouble, but I didn't feel the slightest bit sorry for her. After moving to an apartment closer to his workplace, Bob initiated a divorce through a lawyer. Because of the solid proof of infidelity, there was no way Linda could escape. My husband and I proceeded to arrange for the demolition of our original family home. It seemed that Linda had plans to move into the original family home, but the demolition had begun and she was now without a place to live. We've already cut ties with Linda, and she's about to divorce Bob and become a total stranger again. Yet, her audacity to try to stick around in our house is unbelievable. She probably didn't care if others were inconvenienced as long as she benefited. However, even her own parents wouldn't forgive her for such behavior. She had tearfully turned to her parents for help, but they already knew the situation from Bob and turned her away, telling her not to rely on them only in times of trouble. Later, we received an apology directly from Linda's parents. From their worn-out expressions, we could tell they had been having trouble with her for a long time. With nowhere to turn and no savings to hire a lawyer, Linda had no choice but to accept the divorce. Bob, finally divorced, looked visibly relieved, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "Linda's not working, so she's likely to have a tough time from here on out. I am so glad that I managed to divorce her." After his divorce from Linda, he no longer needed to worry about living expenses or savings and was able to focus even more on his work. My husband and I were not informed at the time, but apparently Linda was dipping into the savings account. Her extravagant spending was a concern that he might bankrupt himself. Now it seems he's living quite freely, which, as parents, is a relief. Just when we thought we could live peacefully, something happened. Linda visited our new house. When we looked at the window, we were surprised to see Linda there. She had aged significantly since the time she was married to Bob. Her hair was a mess, her skin lacked elasticity, and her clothes were shabby. Even though she should have gotten some shared property during the divorce, she might be struggling with life so much that it's still not enough. When we opened the door, there was Linda, repeatedly apologizing. Whether she was sincerely apologizing or not, either way, not a shred of sympathy was aroused in us. "What do you want?" "I am so sorry for everything. I have lost my home, my parents have disowned me, and I have nowhere to go. Please let me live here." After all she had done, did she really think we would let her into our house if she begged enough? If so, her thinking is way too superficial. Do you realize what you're asking, after all you've done? You didn't contribute to the household chores while living with us, and you spent my son's money. There is no benefit for us if you live here. We are not a family anymore, you know? I know. It was my fault. So please let me live here. Linda's apology lacked a sense of guilt. She didn't understand why she had been kicked out of the house and served with divorce papers. Rather, she seemed to be under the impression that if she apologized persistently enough, we would give in. Enough. You made both us and our son suffer for a long time, always asking for money, without any consideration, always selfish. Why would we want to let a person like that into our home? Please go back. As we coldly responded, as expected, Linda glared at us with anger-filled eyes. It was clear at a glance that she had not reflected on her actions. Just because I'm begging, you should at least let me stay. You're so stingy, it's terrible. Then why don't you go and ask at some other people's houses? If they're kind, they might let a suspicious woman like you stay. Linda grimaced in frustration, but suddenly, her face turned pale. It was dark and hard to see, but upon closer look, there was a stray cat rubbing against Linda's feet. When Linda started to scream and flap her legs, the stray cat ran away. But when a meow sounded from inside the house, she immediately tensed up. "Do you have a cat?" "Yes, we just started keeping one recently. We've always wanted to adopt a rescue cat." At my response, Linda's cheeks twitched. "I can't believe it! You're keeping a cat!" "Oh, aren't they cute? Why don't you take a look before you go?" "I don't need to." After yelling, Linda bolted off at incredible speed. The truth is, we did start keeping a cat, and we had discussed adopting a rescue cat with my husband long before. The cat that became attached to us is so cute, it makes us completely smitten. We only found out recently that Linda is severely allergic to cats. We happened to learn this while speaking with Bob, so it's not that we got a cat to drive Linda away, but in the end, it did help us fend her off, so we owe the cat our thanks. Since then, Linda has not visited our home. After that, Linda seemed to have barged into Bob's apartment while searching for a place to live. But she was ruthlessly called out by the police and was swiftly taken away, so she was unable to enter his apartment. Since then, we haven't seen Linda. But we heard through the grapevine that she was seen walking around a town in a distant place. Linda had no choice but to start working for her future life, and it seems she is now living out of state. However, for Linda, who has lived off men and hardly worked before, even a part-time job seems to be tough. Due to unfamiliar tasks and her overly selfish personality, it seems she can't keep a job for long and often gets fired. The hard-earned money she finally makes disappears in living expenses, and it seems she is now living day-to-day while working at a factory that comes with a dormitory. She has always done as she pleased, so it's only fair she goes through such hardships. I think it's good for her to experience firsthand how hard-earned money can easily disappear. Bob has always been troubled by Linda's extravagant spending. Furthermore, it seems that Linda has been officially disowned by her parents. Her parents, who have been put out by her extravagant spending and inflexible selfishness since long ago, have decided to cut ties with their daughter. I don't think Linda's parents are wrong in their decision. There's no rule that says all is forgiven just because they are family. My husband and I are living happily in our new home with our new family member, the cat. The time we spend playing with the cat while feeling smitten is so enjoyable and peaceful, it's irreplaceable. Of course, we also meet Bob occasionally, and going out for meals or hearing about his recent events is also a pleasure. Ideally, I wanted Bob to grasp this happiness too, but he might have new encounters ahead. When that time comes, I hope he lives with a partner who respects and cares for each other. I also want to cherish these happy times with my husband.